Do you know how long it has been since I've done a favourite books video? I was like, it's definitely recent, like it can't have been that long ago. 7 years. It was 7 years ago that I last did a favourite books video. That's abysmal. Comprising my list for this video was absolutely excruciating. There are a good like 30 books on this coffee table right now, and I whittled it down to 5. Forced myself to just pick 5. And I have, I think managed to choose my 5 favourite books of all time. One thing to know about me if you're new to my channel, first of all, hi, my name's Emma. Do subscribe if you like book content, is that I'm dyslexic. So rereading books is really not a thing that I do very often, if ever. And the reason that I've chosen the 5 that are currently on this little pile in front of me is because at some point I know for a fact I will reread these books. And that's just not a thing that I do. I'm already looking forward to forgetting enough about these books in order to really enjoy rereading them. So this is by no means definitive. If you ask me in a week, I may have already changed my mind. And I will do this in no particular order because if you ask me to rank them, that's too much. This is Brideshead Revisited, The Sacred and Profane Memories of Captain Charles Ryder. It's by Evelyn Waugh. This is a 5th edition that I have because I no longer have my actual copy that I read, which is slightly devastating to me, but this 5th edition is rented to look really similar to a 1st edition, so big fan. And yeah, I needed, you know, I can't not have a copy of one of my favourite books. It's a novel from 1945 and it follows the character Captain Charles Ryder from like the 20s to the 40s, and what it does is hugely focuses in on his relationship with 2 children, well, his peers, from a very aristocratic family, and their like Palladian castle, Brideshead. That's why it's Brideshead Revisited. It's the name of the house, and the sort of structure to it is that he is in the army, and at one point they are now using this house for military purposes, and he is back there in the house after many years, and how very different the house now is to when he knew it. And essentially it sort of chronicles his relationship, particularly with the son of the family. His name is Sebastian, or Lord Sebastian, and also his sister Julia. So it's Charles's reflection on that. This novel is also set then in part in the beginning in Oxford, where Charles and Sebastian meet, and it really chronicles, you know, their relationship and this steady decline that the characters go through for various reasons. I remember when I wrote my sort of Goodreads review about this novel for the first time, I think one of the things I said was how it starts out feeling like a really warm summer, and then over the course of the novel it kind of turns into this really dark, bleak autumn. And I think that is such a good way of explaining Brideshead even now, because when he revisits this sort of heyday in his mind, that half of the novel is actually called Et in Arcade Ego. It's very much about like their Oxford years where they meet at university, being young and being so full of promise and hope and life. And there's of course also a period set before the Second World War. These really are sort of their glory years, and then the novel progresses, and it's how you see from Charles's point of view Sebastian decline and the things that happen to him and the reason these things happen to him, and just then how the house declines. And there's something very grippingly tragic about this, especially when you can see somebody who is your friend going down a bad path, and you can't stop them. There's really nothing you can do even though you try. And with Charles and Sebastian's relationship, there's also a lot that has been, even over the decades, debated about like, is their relationship homosexual, is it romantic, is it platonic, like what exactly is the nature of their relationship? And I think you can read it in so many different ways, which also makes this endlessly debatable and discussable with others, which is part of my enjoyment of it. So it's usually a book about nostalgia, I guess a little bit of grief, and massively this wanting for the past where things really did seem and feel better, especially in the context of like big events that you can't get away from. In this case, it's obviously the Second World War, and it kind of makes me feel about how we now think about COVID, how we now have, I think, quite a strong nostalgia for this pre-COVID world, even if, you know, how much better was a pre-COVID world, but it's the fact that you will always want for a world you can no longer return to. Like, yes, Brideshead is still there, but it's not Brideshead anymore. It's certainly not how he knew it, and how physically everything can look the same, but everything is very, very different. I think it's quite a bit about growing up, not coming of age, but growing up after you've come of age, which I think isn't explored as much. But I think it's a lot about this want for a place you can no longer go back to, even if you're stood in the middle of it, or a want to return to a person you knew even if they stood in front of you, and the fact that sometimes you just you can't go back and you cannot go home. And it's also a big commentary on, like, you know, this interwar period and this sort of like feeling of last hurrah of British society, and yeah, I guess a nostalgia for British aristocracy. And there's also like bits about Catholicism mixed in here, because this is a British aristocratic family that is Catholic. So there's a lot of these kind of things mixed in there, and it is something that I think really strongly captured my imagination in a big way, because obviously, yes, it's set in a big lovely house, but also about friendship, and then also very strongly this sense of nostalgia. It's also beautifully written, and it's one that if you haven't read it, I'm jealous that you get to read it for the first time. So it's one that I really do think I will reread at some point. It's the kind of thing that I think you should read in like a late August. That's how this book feels. I think it suits when one has a nostalgia for the summer sun. Interpret that however it is that you like, but it's a novel in the years since I've read it that I have found myself consistently thinking about and consistently discussing with my friends, because one of my friends also absolutely adores this novel. So for me, it's a novel that's proved ultimately unforgettable. Okie dokie, next up we have If on a Winter's Night a Traveller by Italo Calvino. Sorry, I have the strong impulse to just tell you all, like, I absolutely love this book. It's one of my favourites, but it applies to all of these novels. But with this one, it's just such a I just have to tell you how much I love it. This was one of these books that I read during my undergrad, and I think it fundamentally shaped and reshaped how it was that I thought about literature, how it was that I thought about storytelling, how it is that I think about what you as a writer can just write. It's something that just showed me that you can do whatever it is that you want. If you're capable of putting it into words, you can write it. Isn't that such an exciting possibility? I think it's something that really rewired my brain when reading it. It's from 1979. It's a postmodernist story, narrative, and the premise is that you, the reader, are trying to finish reading the novel If on a Winter's Night a Traveller, but much to your chagrin realise that the page numbers are not in order, so then you have to go back to the bookshop to try and get the correct version of this book, where you meet somebody who becomes an important character in the book, and the relationship then that you develop with this character as you look for the rest of the novel. It is very much a book for bibliophiles. It is for those of you who love reading. It is really a love letter to the love of literature, the love of reading, the enjoyment of stories, the enjoyment of just narrative, and it's so fun, playful, entertaining, and engaging. This might not be for all of you. It really, really might not. It could very easily jar people with how it's structured, and because it's not ordered and regular, and the fact that it's just really, what I enjoy about it is that it's so free in that sense. But this could also be something that puts other people off. I, for one, it really changed how it is that I thought about novels and literature, words and writing. It completely changed it really, really rewired my brain, and I say that with full seriousness. And I also feel what I took from it is that a love of literature doesn't have to be serious. There's nothing that says that it always has to be very, very serious. And just because something is written to be fun and playful doesn't like lower the bar on it as literature either. I think it's a really important thing to learn at that point in my undergrad, that like, you're reading literature because you love it. You're studying literature because you love it. You're not supposed to be suffering, okay? And it is just, you know, it's for the love of books. And also this really was my gateway into reading Calvino. His essay, Why Read the Classics, again, fundamentally rewired my brain. I've read The Baron and the Trees, I've read Invisible Cities, I've read a bunch of his non-fiction work. It's just, it introduced me to Calvino, and he has never disappointed me. I even recently finally tracked down, oh my gosh, I haven't even shown this to you guys yet. I finally tracked down this beautiful, fairly recent Folio Society edition of Italian folklore that Italo Calvino went around Italy to collect, but it's in English translation, and I wanted to buy it at the time, but I couldn't find it online anymore. I've said so many times online saying like, I would love to finally find this, and one of you saw it in a bookshop, DM'd me about it, the bookshop in Edinburgh, mind you, and then I emailed that bookshop being like, please do you still have this? And they did. So it's just something that introduced me to one of my favourite writers. So I love this book very much for how it really fundamentally rewired my brain and my approach to reading literature, and fundamentally my enjoyment of it. But then also that it introduced me to Calvino, who's an author I absolutely adore because his love for literature is just everywhere in what he writes, which I think is incredibly special because I don't feel that in any other author like I feel it with Calvino. I do not just love this book, I am fundamentally indebted to it. So you know what, let's follow that up with another Italian. This is Il Gattopardo, or The Leopard, by Tomasi di Lampedusa. It is not a 19th century novel, it is a 20th century novel set in the 19th century. It is a novel from 1952? 1958 rather, and it follows a Sicilian family in the 19th century during the Risorgimento, which is the unification of Italy, as Garibaldi with his army lands on the shores of Sicily, which is where this novel is set. So it's about how this aristocratic Sicilian family essentially navigate this entire restructuring of their world and their existence and their future. And the novel primarily revolves around Fabrizio Corbera, the Prince of Salina, who is the namesake of the novel. He is the Leopard. Netflix did an absolutely stunning limited series adaptation of this year, I believe it came out, and it is unbelievable. And if you have not seen it, I cannot encourage anything but that you watch it and watch it again and again. There are many episodes where I cried and sobbed, and I think the casting is excellent, the acting is excellent, all the historical settings, excellent. It is a series and adaptation that did not disappoint, and it is one that I felt was done with a lot of love for the novel itself. And there are changes that they made, but I think the changes that have been made structurally have been very smart changes to make it adaptable to be a limited series. And so it's one of those ones where, like, you see the adaptation changes and you're like, yeah, honestly, fair. And what I find so special about this novel is how it's at both a family drama at the same time as being this drama of this huge historical event and change, this massive period of history. And I think that is something that I find very rarely done well, that you can tell such a big story through the like seeming minutiae of, you know, family drama and family episodes. Like how you can reflect this whole huge thing through a family's love for one another, their wants and their dreams, is unbelievable storytelling. The main relationships in the novel being that between the Leopard and his daughter Concetta, her cousin Tancredi, and the beautiful Angelica and her father Don Sadara, and then also this man's money too. The way that this novel works through all of these things, the feelings, the emotions, it's just, there is so much to it, and it is something that I really look forward to rereading. The fact that, again, yes, okay, sue me, a lot of these books you will notice are set in big beautiful homes, big beautiful palaces and houses. Like, it's a terrible thing to read about, but it's just so fun seeing these very intense periods of history and these social restructuring, almost reorganisation, as told through these characters' perspectives, as is also done in Brideshead Revisited. And it is just a novel that, you know, I found myself thinking about this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And it's just one that, you know, I really, since the years that I've read it, I just can't stop thinking about it. There is one line in it that is just, in order for everything to stay the same, everything must change. You know, this is not necessarily like a philosophical novel, but it is one that remains so true. And it again is something that I think about all the time. I feel like I fell in love with the characters. I feel like I fell in love with all of their homes and their settings, and I really feel like I fell in love with this period of history too. And it's the reason that I know about the unification of Italy, it's the reason I've learned all of that history is through this novel, because it really inspired that in me to go and like research it and look it up. And so again, it is a novel that I feel indebted to because of that. And I also, even though I finished this years ago, I know exactly where I was when I read the last page of this novel.
I'm finishing reading this, be like, I don't know, it's appropriate to be reading in Italy, I guess.
I was on the Italian coast in Amalfi. I was lying on the beach, and I really remember how, like, finishing that last page, how the only thing I could do for I think the next hour was just stare out at the sea. That's all I could do. I remember so vividly how that felt, like watching the novel fade away. And then also knowing that this is published posthumously also kind of adds to that like bittersweetness of it. So it is again a lot about nostalgia in the way that Brideshead is, but also very much about a father's love for his children, and how even if it appears as if he is acting against their best interest, it's done from that like parental point of love where they're trying to look not just after their children's interests in the next year, 5 years, but in the next 10, 50 years, but also at what cost. I love this book very much, and I do look forward to the day that you and I can spend some time together again. I look forward to that. Let us now bring it back to English shores. Let us bring it to Virginia Woolf, to Orlando. God, do I adore this book. This was something that I went into reading it quite blind. Reading Orlando blind is probably one of the best ways to read it. To go in with no pretenses, no expectations, and then just to enjoy. And if that's what you think might sound good for you, then you can skip this next bit of the video because, you know, spoilers and whatnot. It is Woolf's novel from 1982.
1928, not 1982. Do you know how many times I watched this video, proof watched it before I caught this mistake? The dyslexia persists, okay?
And it is written pretty much for Vita Sackville-West, who is both Woolf's lover and very close friend. It is the story of an Elizabethan gentleman who we follow through the ages because Orlando, for some reason or another, seemingly does not age. It's how you follow him through not just the decades but the centuries, and how also inexplicably at one point Orlando just switches gender, and it is never addressed in the novel. It is never anything in the novel. The novel just continues as is because, you know, it's Woolf, so why not? It is once again a novel that is predominantly set within a big stately home. Look, I clearly just have a type, alright? But it was the kind of thing that experiencing it for the first time, it was just, this is what a command of the English language can produce. There is something where if you want to really learn and understand what good English literature is, what good English writing is, this is a novel you read for that. A lot of what I'd read up until the point of reading this was a lot of European fiction that was in translation. And so I think in part I'd missed out on English literature when it is very, very well written. Not to say that translations are obviously not well done, that's not what I'm saying, but to read English the way it is designed to be, to its highest of capabilities, its most interesting and luxurious and just at its most excellent. Again, Woolf is somebody that you read for that. I think it fundamentally shaped me again in terms of like how it just showed me what is just fundamentally possible to do with words when English is where you are at your best. And it is such a joy to be able to read such excellent writing. And again, for me personally, it's such a joy to read something that is really, you know, up my street. I mean, historical novel, big house, it feels like this was written for me. It's meant to be partially inspired by Vita Sackville-West's home, Knoll House, which is in Sevenoaks. I have not yet been inside, but I've been to the deer park bits attached to it. Excellent data from London if you're interested, by the way. And so we follow Orlando from, you know, the English Elizabethan court to him in Constantinople under Charles II, to Orlando's metamorphosis into a woman, to then Orlando's trip back to England, to where then she is harassed because now must she marry, you know, because everything is still in her name, but there is the added complication of her sex and gender. Through the 18th century and the 19th century, and even going all the way up to the 20th century, there is just something so fun about it, and it also fundamentally changed my perception of how time can be written in novels. There is no real concept of time in here. Orlando is simply not bound to time the way that you and I are. It is something that for Orlando ebbs and flows, and you can have a sentence that begins, you know, at one point and then actually manages to end 50 years later. You know, Orlando steps out for a walk and comes back, you know, 75 years later, and it's just as if nothing has happened or has changed. I think it just showed me that words do not have to be bound by the same limitations that you and I physically are. Hello?
Hello, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going okay. Have you ever read Orlando?
What's that about?
About a 16th century nobleman who just doesn't age.
Interesting. What are you doing?
I'm in the middle of recording. What are you reading right now?
The Spire.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's alright.
Orlando taught me in the same way that If on a Winter's Night a Traveller did. When you are writing and you are an author, it's your world, and if you choose to be, you can play God on all fronts. Not just with the lives of characters, but also with just the rules of the physical world. And while that is something that I think we think more overtly about in sci-fi and fantasy, you can obviously still do that with literary fiction. There is nothing stopping you. You simply can just do whatever you want. And that is something that is very exciting, because you're telling me that words can do that? Crazy stuff. And now very lastly, we are going to Stendhal, the Charterhouse of Parma. This was something I read again during my undergrad, during my last year of my undergrad. A 19th century novel by Stendhal. He also wrote The Red and the Black, which I despise despise. I hate that book. This one I think is absolutely excellent, and it's set during the Napoleonic era. And what I think hugely rewired my brain with this isn't like, oh, 5 books that rewired my brain, but it really may as well be. It's not just that I enjoyed them as works of literature, it's how they fundamentally altered the way that I see not just literature but the world and myself and what it is possible to do with writing and words. Like, I feel almost indebted to these works for how they've completely changed my opinions on what it is to love books, to love literature, to love reading. Simply put, they've fundamentally added joy to my life. And I'm not saying that these books will necessarily do that to you, but I'm saying keep your eyes and your mind open to the fact that you will one day come across a book. We don't know which, maybe if we're lucky, if I'm lucky, it could be a recommendation that I've given you, but one day you will come across a book that will change the way that you see the world and experience the world. Isn't that exciting? The idea that there are books out there that, you know, you don't even know of yet that will hugely impact you and change who you are. And if you feel like that isn't happening to you, I encourage you to read more widely, and I encourage you to try a classic. I encourage you to try maybe outside of the genres that you currently like. I encourage you to try something more, you know, objectively literary. You know, there really is a reason to read the good stuff. And one of the good stuff, in my opinion, is the Charterhouse of Parma. I think what this really taught me was like, oh man, like, is this going to be fun? This is really almost like a bit of an action-adventure novel. It follows a young Italian nobleman, Fabrice del Dongo, who I can't remember if I was a little bit in love with. I am in love with Fabrice. He's a main character. I love him. So captivating, and I think Stendhal captures youth and happiness in such a way, and it's just very enjoyable, and it is romantic with quite a big capital R, and I just really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to read. I still think the character that I've been the most in love with of any classic is Prince Andrei, obviously, in Tolstoy's War and Peace. But it's just that it's such a fun and adventurous novel. It's this young Italian nobleman, yes, who then, like many did, becomes besotted with Napoleon, and he essentially like runs off from his home in order to go join the Napoleonic army. Like, this like Napoleon fanboyism is something that I would love to see like studied and written about. I know guys in my personal life who 100% would have run off to go join Napoleon. What is this like grip that he has on like just young men? I think it's this like, or quasi Alexander the Great thing. Yeah, Fabrice just like fucks off to go join Napoleon, and then he dresses up as a French officer and he ends up on the battlefield in Waterloo, and it's just a bit ridiculous. But also I enjoyed it hugely because it was what I felt like one of the first times I'd read a classic that properly showed teenagers doing teenager behaviour. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just a bit ridiculous. Hello?
How's it going?
I can't remember if Stendhal was an officer in the French army. I'm assuming he was, but I can't remember what his rank is. But I also massively love when characters in novels go off wandering through like major historical events. There's just something so silly and like entertaining about it. And the other thing is that Stendhal was an officer in the Napoleonic army. He survived the retreat from Moscow in 1812, which even if you only know a little bit about 19th century history, you should probably know that was fucking disastrous. A lot of people died. So yes, Fabrice's forays into the French military are just a little bit disastrous. The novel itself actually begins with Napoleon's sort of sweep into Lombardy, into Milan. And the fact that this teenager has this, you know, disastrous time is obviously because at this point, and I've said this before when I talked about The Count of Monte Cristo, banger by the way, probably another one of my favourite books of all time. I read it this summer. Stendhal focuses hugely more on like the realist novel, because you have this age of neoclassicism that you leave behind in French literature and European literature, and then you start to take this turn towards more the realist novel. It's that, you know, Fabrice really doesn't feel like this huge hero in this novel. It's you're watching him do this dumb shit and you're like, why are you doing that? But it's also the kind of thing that you feel like, yeah, there are guys, you know, there are boys, you know, who would have done exactly the same thing. It becomes a more relatable novel. That is the whole thing about realism, right? It just becomes a whole lot more real. But that is really only the beginning part of the novel. There is so much more in here about different relationships, about anything to do with like the marriage market and court and the court at Parma, a fictionalized court of Parma, because at the time it's actually Napoleon's second wife, Marie-Louise, who is Duchess of Parma, so actually rules. Because Stendhal was a diplomat, he understood a lot of this kind of like, you know, political intrigue and sort of these very subtle things that are actually, you know, very important diplomatic acts and all this kind of stuff. So it's an incredibly like vivid world that he renders for you, and it is so enjoyable and just very, very fun. There's imprisonments and there's poisonings, threats of execution, lovers who can and cannot be together, and because this follows Fabrice's entire life up until his death, all of the love and rather lack thereof that he receives, and the complications of a complicated relationships and the plotting and the scheming, and it was just a novel that I found so enjoyable, and I think it really showed me how entertaining classics can be. I really think it is something that I inhaled it quite quickly. This is something that really showed me a different side to myself as a reader, but that also I think really changed what I felt like I could approach novel-wise, and it gave me like a trust in the 19th century. And I used to think that I really hated, for example, the Romantics. The module I was doing that this was part of just like showed me that I was completely wrong. It was just really the English Romantics I didn't like. It broadened my horizon hugely to like Italian and French literature, and it gave me such a love and enjoyment of that, which still fundamentally persists in what I choose to read. And yeah, I don't know, it just changed my mind as to what I thought I wanted to read. You know, if you'd have told me beforehand, being like, oh, you know, you can read this novel about this like guy who goes off to join the Napoleonic army, I'd be like, why the fuck would I want to read that? But honestly, why would you not want to read that? It's so fun, it's so entertaining. It's also not just about Fabrice, it's also about this woman Gina, his aunt, who becomes a duchess, and about her relationships and her intrigues and stuff. So yeah, it's just, again, a novel that, like the others, really just changed my mind on understanding what was possible with literature. And looking at this pile now, I think what's interesting about it is that a lot of these novels I read in very similar time frames. I think it was something where at university I was really starting to learn so much more about literature and how to think about literature and how to approach literature, and I think it really, you know, I like to say that my degree did something to my brain. I did an undergrad in comparative literature, if anybody was wondering. I've got quite a few videos on my channel about that if you're interested, but I think it just opened my mind, and I guess that's what you really want, you know, if you are lucky enough to go to university. That is the kind of thing that you would hope it would do. It's not that I haven't read good things since, it's that these novels have also, it's now been long enough that I can't wait to reread them. Just like I said earlier, it's actually quite a new feeling to me. Right now, if you ask me, these are my 5 favourite novels. I owe them so much, I enjoyed them so much, they taught me so much, and I can't wait to one day read them again, to meet their characters again, to experience their worlds again, and to just enjoy their writing again. But we're not quite done yet, because this is a favourites video. It would be very wrong to not discuss Beckett. My favourite play of all time is Waiting for Godot. I was first introduced to Waiting for Godot when I was 16, 17 and I was studying it at school. Gosh, was it now this year or was it already last year? I got to see Waiting for Godot on stage at the Royal Haymarket Theatre with one of my friends. It starred Ben Whishaw and he was absolutely excellent. It was an absolute pleasure to see that man on stage, and it was an absolute pleasure to finally see Godot on stage in person for the first time. And my friend and I were really just, we were hooting with laughter. The giggles, the crying tears, because it was so funny, very enjoyable, and also because I have been nannying that some of the conversations that you hear in that play, I'm just like, I had this conversation earlier today, like, what do you mean? And it's just so funny that 10 years on from my first experience of this play, my viewing experience has changed. It's changed, but it's still so fun and enjoyable. Godot is something I would, if I can, I would love to see it on stage every 10 years to just, you know, I'll keep watching it on stage until I decide that I actually do in fact hate it. And again, like all of these novels that I've talked about, like all culture that you experience and consume, it might not be for you, but it certainly was for me. And what we found really telling that when we were watching Waiting for Godot was that after the interval, there were a lot of people who did not come back. And I think that's crazy. But yeah, it was just something that, again, showed me what was possible to do with words, with theatre, with just what the audience experiences. If you've been a long time watcher of my channel, you know that I've talked about Godot so many times, but it's just funny how something can so fundamentally impact you and just never let go. And so for that, I love it. I've loved this play since I was 16 years old and I am 27. What a pleasure, what a joy. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. These are, for right now, as you ask me right now, my 5-6 favourite novels, works. They will all be linked down below for you to go check out if you do so desire. I would absolutely love, 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 love to know what your favourite novel is. What is it? Why? And how do you think it has changed you, influenced you, impacted you? That is what I want to know. Please tell me. I am so nosy. But yes, as ever, thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.